Chapter 15.
You've made a pretty mess, Podlurak.
Javel Fish spat furiously.
You've got us in a pretty tangle. We've been wandering around these offshoots for an hour. I've heard about these bogs. I've heard evil things about them. People and ships perish here. Where's the river? Where's the shipping channel? What? Shut your trap, by thunder, said the captain in annoyance. Where's the shipping channel? Where's the shipping lane? Up my arse, that's where. So clever, are you? Be my guest. Now's a chance to distinguish yourself. There's another fork. Where shall we sail, smart Alec? To port, as the current carries us? Or perhaps you'll order us starboard?
Fish snorted and turned his back on him. Podlurak grabbed the wheel and steered the cutter into the left branch. The leadsman gave a cry. Then a moment later, Kevenar van Vliet yelled, but much louder.
Away from the bank, Podlurak, screamed Petru Cobbin. Hard to starboard! Away from the bank! Away from the bank!
What is it?
Serpents! Don't you see them? Serpents!
Adario Bach swore. The left bank was teeming with snakes. The reptiles were writhing among the reeds and riverside weeds, crawling over half-submerged trunks, dangling down, hissing from overhanging branches. Geralt recognized cottonmouths, rattlesnakes, giraricas, boomslangs, green bush vipers, puff adders, arietes, black mambas, and others he didn't know. The entire crew of the Prophet fled in panic from the port side, yelling at various pitches. Kevenar van Vliet ran astern and squatted down, trembling all over behind the Witcher. Podlurak turned the wheel, and the cutter began to change course. Geralt placed his hand on Podlurak's shoulder.
No, he said. Hold the course as you were. Don't go near the starboard bank.
But they're snakes. Podlurak pointed at the branch they were approaching, hung all over with hissing reptiles.
They'll drop onto the deck. There are no snakes. Hold the course, away from the starboard bank.
The sheets of the mainmast caught on a hanging branch. Several snakes coiled themselves around them, and several others, including 2 mambas, dropped onto the deck. Raising their heads and hissing, they attacked the men huddled up against the starboard side. Fish and Cobbin fled aft, and the deckhands, yelling, bolted astern. One of them jumped into the water and disappeared before he could cry out. Blood frothed on the surface.
"A la push!"
shouted the Witcher, pointing at a wave and a dark shape moving away.
"It's real, unlike the snakes."
"I detest reptiles,"
sobbed Kevenar van Vliet, huddled up by the side.
"I detest snakes."
"There aren't any snakes, and there weren't any. It's an illusion."
The deckhands shouted and rubbed their eyes. The snakes had vanished, both from the deck and from the bank. They hadn't even left any tracks.
"What?" Petru Cobbin grunted. "What was it?" "An illusion," repeated Geralt. "The Aguara has caught up with us." "You what?" "The vixen. She's creating illusions to confuse us. I wonder how long she's been doing it. The storm was probably genuine, but there were 2 offshoots. The captain's eyes didn't deceive him. The Aguara cloaked one of the offshoots in an illusion and faked the compass needle. She also created the illusion of the snakes." "Which are tall tales," Fish snorted. "Elven superstitions. Old wives' tales. What? Some old fox has abilities like that? Hides rivers, confounds compasses, conjures up serpents where there aren't any. Fiddlesticks. I tell you, it's these waters. We were poisoned by vapours, venomous swamp gases and miasmas. That's what caused those hallucinations. They're illusions created by the Aguara." "Do you take us for fools?" yelled Cobbin. "Illusions? What illusions? Those were real vipers. You all saw them, didn't you? Heard the hissing? I even smelled their stench." "That was an illusion. The snakes weren't real." The Prophet's sheets snagged on overhanging branches again. "That's a hallucination, is it?" asked one of the deckhands, holding out his hand. "An illusion? That snake isn't real?" "No. Stand still." The huge ariete, hanging from a bough, gave a blood-curdling hiss and struck like lightning, sinking its fangs into the sailor's neck, once, twice. The deckhand gave a piercing scream, fell, shaking in convulsions, banging the back of his head rhythmically against the deck. Foam appeared on his lips, and blood began to ooze from his eyes. He was dead before they could get to him. The Witcher,
covered the body in a canvas sheet.
"Damn it, man," he said. "Be heedful. Not everything here is a mirage."
Beware!
yelled the sailor in the bow.
Beware! There's a whirlpool ahead of us! A whirlpool!
The old riverbed branched again. The left branch, the one the current was carrying them into, was swirling and churned up in a raging whirlpool. The swirling maelstrom was surging with froth like soup in a cauldron. Logs and branches, and even an entire tree with a forked crown, were revolving in the whirlpool. The leadsman fled from the bow, and the others began to yell. Podlorak stood calmly. He turned the wheel, steering the cutter towards the calmer offshoot to the right. He wiped his forehead.
"Just in time. Would have been ill if that whirlpool had sucked us in. Aye, would have given us a right old spinning." "Whirlpools," shouted Cobbin. "Lopastras, alligators, leeches. We don't need no illusions. These swamps are teeming with monstrosities, with reptiles, with every kind of venomous filth. It's too bad that we strayed here. Many ships have vanished here."
Adario Bach finished the sentence, pointing.
"And that's probably real."
There was a wreck lying stuck in the mud on the right bank. It was rotten and smashed, buried up to the bulwarks, covered in waterweed, coiled around with vines and moss. They observed it as the prophet glided past, borne by the faint current. Podlorak prodded Geralt with his elbow.
"Master Witcher," he said softly, "the compass has gone doolally again. According to the needle, we've moved from an eastwards course to a southern. If it's not a Valpine trick, it's not good. No one has ever charted these swamps, but it's known they extend southwards from the shipping channel. So we're being carried into the very heart of them." "But we're drifting," observed Adario Bach. "There's no wind. We're being borne by the current, and the current means we're joining the river current of the Pontar." "Not necessarily," said Geralt, shaking his head. "I've heard about these old river courses. The direction of the flow can change, depending on whether the tide's coming in or going out. And don't forget about the Aguara. This might also be an illusion."
The banks were still densely covered in cypresses, and large pot-bellied tupelos, bulbous at the base, were also growing more common. Many of the trees were dead and dry. Dense festoons of bromeliads hung from the decayed trunks and branches, their leaves shining silver in the sun. Egrets lay in wait on the branches, surveying the passing prophet with unmoving eyes. The leadsman shouted. This time, everybody saw it. Once again, she was standing on a bough hanging over the water, erect and motionless. Podlorak unhurriedly leaned on a handle, steering the cutter towards the left bank, and the vixen suddenly barked, loudly and piercingly. She barked again as the prophet sailed past. A large fox flashed across the bow and hid in the undergrowth.
"That was a warning,"
said the Witcher, when the hubbub on deck had quietened down.
"A warning and a challenge. Or rather, a demand." "We would free the girl," Adario Bach added astutely. "Of course we would, but we can't free her if she's dead."
Kevenar van Vliet groaned and clutched his temples. Wet, dirty and terrified, he no longer resembled a merchant who could afford his own ship, more an urchin caught scrumping plums.
"What to do?" he moaned. "What to do?"
"I know," Javel Fish suddenly declared. "We'll fasten the dead wench to a barrel and toss her overboard. The vixen will stop to mourn the pup. We'll gain time."
"Shame on you, Mr. Fish!"
The glovemaker's voice suddenly hardened.
"It doesn't do to treat a corpse thus. It's not civilized."
"And was she civilized? A she-elf? On top of that, half an animal? I tell you, that barrel's a good idea."
"That idea could only occur to a complete idiot," said Adario Bach, drawing out his words.
"And it would be the death of us all. If the vixen realizes we've killed the girl, we're finished." "It wasn't us as killed the pup," muttered in Petru Cobbin, before Fish, now scarlet with anger, could react. "It wasn't us. Paula, did it. He's to blame. We're clean." "That's right," confirmed Fish,
turning not towards Van Vliet and the Witcher, but to Podlorak and the deckhands.
"Paula's guilty. Let the vixen take vengeance on him. We'll shove him in a boat with a corpse, and they can drift away. And meanwhile we'll—"
Cobbin and several deckhands received the idea with an enthusiastic cry, but Podlorak immediately dampened their enthusiasm. "I shan't permit it," he said. "Nor I." Kevnar Van Vliet was pale. "Mr. Parlehy may indeed be guilty. Perhaps it's true that his deed calls for punishment. But abandon him? Leave him to his death? I will not agree." "It's his death or ours," yelled Fish. "For what are we to do? Witcher, will you protect us when the she-fox boards the craft?" "I shall." A silence fell. The prophet Lebioda drifted among the stinking water, seething with bubbles, dragging behind it garlands of waterweed. Egrets and pelicans watched them from the branches. The leadsman in the bow warned them with a cry, and a moment later they all began to shout. To see the rotten wreck covered in climbing plants and weeds. It was the same wreck they'd passed an hour before. "We're sailing around in circles." The dwarf confirmed the fact. "We're back where we started. The she-fox has caught us in a trap. There's only one way out." Geralt pointed at the left offshoot and the whirlpool seething in it. "To sail through that." "Through that geyser?" yelled Fish. "Have you gone quite mad? It'll smash us to pieces." "Smash us to pieces," confirmed Podlorak. "Or capsize us, or throw us onto the bog, and we'll end up like that wreck. See those trees being tossed about in the maelstrom? That whirlpool is tremendously powerful." "Indeed, it is. Because it's probably an illusion. I think it's another of the Aguara's illusions." "You think? You're a witcher and you can't tell." "I'd recognize a weaker illusion, and these ones are incredibly powerful. But I reckon—" "You reckon? And if you're wrong?" "We have no choice," snapped Podlorak. "Either we go through the whirlpool, or we sail around in circles. To our deaths." Addario Bach finished his sentence. "To our miserable deaths." Every few moments, the boughs of the trees spinning around in the whirlpool stuck up out of the water, like the outstretched arms of a drowned corpse. The whirlpool churned, seethed, surged, and sprayed foam. The prophet shivered and suddenly shot forward, sucked into the maelstrom. The tree being tossed by the whirlpool slammed against the side, splashing foam. The cutter began to rock and spin around quicker and quicker. The entire crew were yelling at various pitches. And suddenly, everything went quiet. The water calmed down, and the surface became smooth. The prophet Lebioda drifted very slowly between the tupeloes on the banks. "You were right, Geralt," said Addario Bach, clearing his throat. "It was an illusion after all." Podlorak looked long at the Witcher and said nothing. He finally took off his cap. His crown, as it turned out, was as shiny as an egg. "I signed up for river navigation," he finally croaked, "because my wife asked me to. It'd be safer on the river, she said. Safer than on the sea. I won't have to fret each time you set sail, she said." He put his cap back on, shook his head, then tightly grabbed a handle of the wheel. "Is that it?" Kevnar Van Vliet whimpered from under the cockpit. "Are we safe now?" No one answered his question. The water was thick with algae and duckweed. Cypresses began to dominate the riverside trees, their pneumatophores, or aerial roots, some of them almost 6 feet tall, sticking up densely from the bog and the shallows by the bank. Turtles basked on islands of weed. Frogs croaked. This time they heard her before they saw her. A loud, raucous barking, like a threat or a warning being intoned. She appeared on the bank in her vulpine form, on a withered, overturned tree trunk. She was barking, holding her head up high. Geralt detected strange notes in her voice, and understood that apart from the threats, there was an order. But it wasn't them she was giving orders to. The water under the trunk suddenly frothed, and a monster emerged. It was enormous, covered all over in a greenish-brown pattern of tear-shaped scales. It gobbled and squelched, obediently following the vixen's order, and swam, churning up the water, straight at the prophet.
Is that...
Addario Bach swallowed.
Is that an illusion too?
Not exactly, said Geralt. It's a Vodyanoi. He yelled at Podlorak and the deckhands. She's bewitched the Vodyanoi and set it on us. Boathooks! All hands to the boathooks! The Vodyanoi broke the surface alongside the ship, and they saw the flat, algae-covered head, the bulging fishy eyes, and the conical teeth in its great maw. The monster struck the side furiously once, twice, making the whole ship shudder. When the crew came running up with boathooks, it fled and dived, only to emerge with a splash beyond the stern a moment later, right by the rudder blade, which it caught in its teeth and shook until it creaked. "It'll break the rudder!" Podlorak bellowed, trying to stab the monster with a boathook. "It'll break the rudder! Grab the halyards and raise it! Drive the bastard away from the rudder!" The Vodyanoi chewed and jerked the rudder, oblivious to the cries and jabs of the boathooks. The blade gave way, and a chunk of wood was left in the creature's teeth. It had either decided that was enough, or the she-fox's spell had lost its force. Suffice it to say that it dived and disappeared. They heard the Aguara barking from the bank. "What next?" yelled Podlorak, waving his arms. "What will she do next? Master Witcher!" "By the gods!" sobbed Kevanar van Vliet. "Forgive us for not believing. Forgive us for killing the little girl. Ye gods, save us!" They suddenly felt a breeze on their faces. The pennant on the prophet, previously hanging pitifully, fluttered, and the boom creaked. "It's opening out!" Fish shouted from the bow. "Over there! Over there! A broad water! There's no doubt it's the river! Sail over there, skipper! Over there!" The river channel was indeed beginning to widen, and something looking like broad water stretched beyond the green wall of reeds. "We did it!" called Cobbin. "Ah, we've won! We've escaped from the swamp!" "By the Mark I!" yelled the leadsman. "By the Mark I!" "All are over!" roared Podlorak, shoving the helmsman away and carrying out his own order. "Shallows!" The prophet Lebioda's prow turned towards the offshoot, bristling with pneumatophores. "Where are you going?" Fish bellowed. "What are you doing?" "Sail for the broad water! Over there! Over there!" "We can't! There's a shallow there! We get stuck! We'll sail to the broad water along an offshoot! It's deeper here!" They heard the Aguara bark again, but didn't see her. Addario Bach tugged Geralt's sleeve. Petru Cobbin emerged from the companionway of the afterpeak, dragging Parlahi, who could barely stay on his feet, by the collar. A sailor followed him carrying the girl, wrapped in a cloak. The other 4 deckhands stood steadfastly beside them, facing the Witcher. They were holding battle-axes, tridents, and iron hooks. "You can't stop us, good sir," rasped the tallest of them. "We want to live. The time has come to act." "Leave the child," drawled Geralt. "Let the merchant go, Cobbin." "No, sir." The sailor shook his head. "We'll toss the body and the merchant overboard. That'll stop the beast. Then we'll get away." "And don't you lot interfere," wheezed another. "We've nothing against you, but don't stand in our way, because you'll get hurt." Kevanar van Vliet curled up by the side and sobbed, turning his head away. Podlorak also looked away resignedly and pursed his lips. He clearly wouldn't react to his own crew's mutiny. "Yes, that's right," said Petru Cobbin, shoving Parlahi. "Toss the merchant and the dead vixen overboard. That's our only chance of escape. Out of the way, Witcher. Go on, boys. Into the boat with them." "What boat?" asked Addario Bach calmly. "Do you mean that one, perhaps?" Jarville Fish, hunched over the oars of a boat, was rowing, heading for the broad water, already quite far from the prophet. He was rowing hard. The oar blades were splashing water and strewing waterweed around. "Fish!" yelled Cobbin. "You bastard! You fucking Orson!" Fish turned around and raised his middle finger at them, then took up the oars again. But he didn't get far. In full view of the prophet's crew, the boat suddenly shot up in a jet of water. and they saw the toothy jaws of a gigantic crocodile, its tail thrashing. Fish flew overboard and began to swim, screaming all the while towards the bank where cypress roots bristled in the shallows. The crocodile set off in pursuit, but the palisade of pneumatophores impeded its progress. Fish swam to the bank and flopped down chest first on a boulder lying there. But it wasn't a boulder. An enormous lizard-like turtle opened its jaws and seized Fish by his upper arm. He howled, struggled, kicked, flinging mud around. The crocodile broke the surface and caught him by the leg. Fish screamed. For a moment, it wasn't clear which of the two reptiles would catch Fish, the turtle or the crocodile. But finally, both of them got something. An arm, with a white, club-shaped bone sticking out of bloody pulp, was left in the turtle's jaws. The crocodile took the rest of Fish's body. A large red patch floated on the surface of the murky water. Geralt took advantage of the crew's stupefaction. He snatched the dead girl from the deckhand and retreated towards the bow. Adario Bach stood beside him, armed with a boathook. Neither Cobbin nor any of the sailors tried to oppose him. On the contrary, they all ran hastily to the stern. Hastily, not to say in a panic. Their faces suddenly took on a deathly pallor. Kevenar van Vliet, huddled by the side, hid his head between his knees and covered it with his arms. Geralt turned around. Whether Podlorak hadn't been paying attention, or the rudder, damaged by the Vodyanoi, wasn't working, suffice it to say that the cutter had sailed right under some hanging boughs and was caught among fallen tree trunks. The Aguara took advantage of it. She leapt down onto the prow, nimbly, lightly and noiselessly, in her vulpine form. Previously, he'd seen her against the sky, when she had seemed black, pitch black. She wasn't. Her fur was dark, and her brush ended in a snow-white blotch, but grey prevailed in her colouring, particularly on her head, which was more typical of a Corsac fox than a silver one. She metamorphosed, growing larger and transforming into a tall woman, with a fox's head, pointed ears and an elongated muzzle. Rows of fangs flashed when she opened her jaws. Geralt knelt down, placed the little girl's body gently on the deck, and retreated. The Aguara howled piercingly, snapped her toothy jaws, and stepped towards him. Parlehi screamed, waving his arms in panic, tore himself away from Cobbin's grasp, and jumped overboard. He sank at once. Van Vliet was weeping. Cobbin and the deckhands, still pale, gathered around Podlorak. Podlorak removed his cap. The medallion around the witch's neck twitched powerfully, vibrated, and made its presence felt. The Aguara kneeled over the girl, making strange noises, neither growling nor hissing. She suddenly raised her head and bared her fangs. She snarled softly, and a fire flared up in her eyes. Geralt didn't move. "We are to blame," he said. "Something truly ill has happened. But may no worse things occur. I cannot allow you to harm these men. I shall not allow it." The vixen stood up, lifting the little girl. She swept her gaze over them all, and finally looked at Geralt.
"You stood in my way," she barked,
clearly, slowly enunciating each word.
"In their defense."
He didn't answer.
"I am taking my daughter," she finished. "That is more important than your lives. But it was you who stood in their defense, O white-haired one. Thus I shall come looking for you. One day, when you have forgotten, and will be least expecting it."
She hopped nimbly onto the bulwark, and then onto a fallen trunk, and disappeared into the undergrowth. in the silence that fell, only Van Vliet's sobbing could be heard. The wind dropped, and it became muggy. The Prophet Lebioda, pushed by the current, freed itself from the bows and drifted down the middle of the offshoot. Podlorak wiped his eyes and forehead with his cap. The leadsman cried. Cobbin cried. And then the others added their voices. The thatched roofs of cottages could suddenly be seen beyond the thicket of reeds and wild rice. They saw nets drying on poles, a yellow strip of sandy beach, a jetty, and further away, beyond the trees on the headland, the wide river beneath a blue sky. "The river! The river! At last!" They all shouted. The deckhands, Petru Cobbin and Van Vliet. Only Geralt and Addario Bach didn't join in the yelling. Podlorak, pushing on the wheel, also said nothing. "What are you doing?" yelled Cobbin. "Where are you going?" "Head for the river! Over there! For the river!" "Not a chance," said the captain, and there was despair and resignation in his voice. "We're becalmed. The ship barely responds to the wheel, and the current grows stronger. We're drifting. It's pushing us, carrying us into the offshoot again, back into the swamp." "No!" Cobbin swore and leapt overboard and swam towards the beach. All the sailors followed his example. Geralt was unable to stop any of them. Addario Bach roughly shoved down Van Vliet, who was preparing to jump. "Blue sky," he said. "A golden, sandy beach, the river. It's too beautiful to be true, meaning it isn't." And suddenly the image shimmered. Suddenly, where a moment earlier there had been fishing cottages, a golden beach and the river beyond the headland, the Witcher, for a brief moment, saw a spider's web of tillandsia trailing right down to the water from the boughs of decaying trees. Swampy banks, cypresses bristling with pneumatophores, bubbles rising up from the murky depths, a sea of water plants, an endless labyrinth of branches. For a second he saw what the Aguara's final illusion had been hiding. The men in the water began to suddenly scream and thrash around, and disappear below the surface, one by one. Petru Cobbin came up for air, choking and screaming, covered entirely in writhing, striped leeches as fat as eels. Then he sank below the water, and didn't come up again. "Get out!" Addario Bach used the boat-hook to pull the small boat which had survived the encounter with the crocodile, and had now drifted to the side of the ship. The dwarf jumped in, and Geralt passed him the still stupefied Van Vliet. "Captain!" Podlorak waved his cap at them. "No, Master Witcher. I shall not abandon my ship. I'll guide her into port, whatever happens. And if not, I'll go down to the bottom with her. Farewell." The Prophet Lebioda drifted calmly and majestically, gliding into an offshoot and vanishing from sight. Addario Bach spat on his hands, hunched forward, and pulled on the oars. The boat sped over the water. "Where to?" "To the broad water beyond the shallows. The river's there, I'm certain. We'll join the shipping channel and come across the ship. And if not, we'll row this boat all the way to Novigrad. But Lorak, he'll cope, if it's his destiny." Kevanar Van Vliet wept. Addario rowed. The sky had grown dark. They heard the distant rumble of thunder. "A storm's coming," said the dwarf. "We'll get bloody soaked." Geralt snorted, and then began to laugh, heartily and sincerely, and infectiously, because a moment later they were both laughing. Addario rowed with powerful, even strokes. The boat skipped over the water like an arrow. "You row as though you've been doing it all your life," said Geralt, wiping his eyes wet with tears. "I thought dwarves didn't know how to sail or swim. You're succumbing to stereotypes." Interlude. 4 days later. The auction house of the brothers Borsody was located in a small square off the main street, which was indeed Novigrad's main road, and connected the town square with the Temple of Eternal Fire. At the beginning of the brothers' career, when they traded horses and sheep, They had only been able to afford a shack beyond the town walls. 42 years after founding their auction house, they now occupied an impressive 3-story building in the most elegant quarter of the city. It had remained in the family's possession, but the objects at auction were now exclusively precious stones, chiefly diamonds and works of art, antiques and collector's items. The auctions took place once a quarter, always on a Friday. That day, the auction room was full to bursting. "There are a good 100 people," thought Antea Deris. The buzz and murmur quietened down. The auctioneer, Abner de Navarrete, took his place behind the podium. As usual, de Navarrete looked splendid in a black velvet jerkin and waistcoat with golden brocade. Princes could have envied him his noble looks and physiognomy, and aristocrats his bearing and manners. It was an open secret that Abner de Navarrete really was an aristocrat, banished from his family and disinherited for drunkenness, profligacy, and debauchery. Had it not been for the Borsody family, Abner de Navarrete would have lived by begging. But the Borsodys needed an auctioneer with aristocratic looks, and none of the other candidates could equal Abner de Navarrete in that regard. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said in a voice as velvety as his jacket. "Welcome to the Borsodys auction house for the quarterly auction of art treasures and antiques. The collection under the hammer today, which you became acquainted with in our gallery, is unique and comes entirely from private owners. The vast majority of you, I note, are regular guests and clients, familiar with the rules of our house and the regulations that apply during auctions. Everybody here was given on entry a brochure containing the regulations. I thus presume that you are all informed regarding the rules and aware of the consequences of breaking them. Let us then begin without delay. Lot number 1, a nephrite group figure, depicting a nymph, with 3 forms. It was made, according to our experts, by gnomes, dated as being 100 years old. Starting price, 200 crowns. I see 250. Going once? Going twice? Going 3 times. Sold to the gentleman with number 36. 2 clerks, perched at neighbouring desks, diligently wrote down the results of the sales. Lot number 2, a Nogmab Teirmoch, a collection of elven tales and poems, richly illustrated, mint condition. Starting price 500 crowns. 550 to Merchant Hoffmeyer. Councillor Drofis 600. Mr. Hoffmeyer 650. No more bids? Sold for 650 crowns to Mr. Hoffmeyer of Hirundum. Lot number 3, an ivory device of a curved and elongated shape, probably used for massage, foreign provenance, age unknown. Starting price 100 crowns. To my left 150. 200 the lady in the mask with number 43. 250 the lady in the veil with number 8. Do I hear 300? 300 to the wife of Apothecary Vosterkratz. 350. Going for the last time? Sold for 350 crowns to the lady with number 43. Lot number 4, Antidotarius Magnus, a unique medical treatise published by Castel Graupian University at the beginning of the Academy's existence. Starting price 800 crowns. I see 850. Dr. Onazorg, 900. 1,000 the Honourable Marty Södergren. Any more bids? Sold for 1,000 crowns to the Honourable Södergren. Lot number 5, Liber de Naturis Bestiarum, a rare edition, bound in beechwood boards, ornately illustrated by... Lot number 6, a girl with a kitten, portrait en 3 quarts, oil on canvas, the Sintron School. Starting price... Lot number 7, a bell with a handle, brass, dwarven work. The age of the item is difficult to ascertain, but it is without doubt antique. There is an engraving on the rim in dwarven runes reading, "Why are you ringing it, you twat?" Starting price? Lot number 8, oils and tempera on canvas, artist unknown. A masterpiece. Please observe the rare use of colour, the play of pigments and the dynamics of the light, the semi-dark mood and the splendid colours of a majestically rendered sylvan landscape. And please note the main figure in the work's central position, a stag in its rutting ground, in atmospheric chiaroscuro. Starting price... Lot number 9, Imago Mundi, also known as Mundus Novus, an extremely rare book, only one copy in the possession of the University of Oxenfurt and a few in private hands. Bound in cordovan. Excellent condition. Starting price, 1,500 crowns. 1,600, the Honourable Vime Vivaldi. 1,650, the Reverend Prochaska. 1,700, the lady at the back of the room. 1,800, Master Vivaldi. 1,850, the Reverend Prochaska. 1,900, Mr. Vivaldi. Bravo, Reverend Prochaska. 2,000 crowns. 2,100, Mr. Vivaldi. Do I hear 2,200?
That book is godless. It contains a heretical message. It ought to be burned. I want to buy it to burn it. 2,200 crowns.
2,500, snorted Vime Vivaldi, stroking a well-groomed white beard. Can you top that, you devout arsonist?
It's a scandal. Mammon is triumphing over probity. Pagan dwarves are treated better than people. I shall complain to the authorities.
Sold for 2,500 crowns to Mr. Vivaldi, Abner de Navarrete announced calmly. However, I remind the Reverend Prochaska about the rules and regulations of the Borsody auction house.
I'm leaving.
Farewell. Please forgive the disturbance. It can happen that the uniqueness and wealth of the Borsody auction house's portfolio calls for strong emotions. Let us continue. Lot number 10. An absolute curio, an exceptional find. 2 Witcher swords. The house has decided not to offer them separately, but as a set, in honour of the Witcher whom they served years ago. The first sword made of steel from a meteorite. The blade was forged and sharpened in Mahakam. There are authentic dwarven punched patterns, confirmed by our experts. The other sword is silver. There are runic signs and glyphs confirming its originality, on the crossguard and along the entire length of the blade. Starting price, 1,000 crowns for the set. The gentleman with number 17, 1,050. Any more bids? Do I hear 1,100? For such rare items? Shit, not much money, muttered Nikifor Moors, court clerk, who was sitting in the back row, by turns nervously clenching his ink-stained fingers into a fist and pulling his fingers through his thinning hair. I knew it wasn't worth bothering. And Teoderis shut him up with a hiss. Count Horvath, 1,100. The gentleman with number 17, 1,200. The Honourable Nino Cianfanelli, 1,500. The gentleman in the mask, 1,600. The gentleman with number 17, 1,700. Count Horvath, 1,800. The gentleman in the mask, 2,000. The Honourable Master Cianfanelli, 2,100. The gentleman in the mask, 2,200. Any more bids? The Honourable Master Cianfanelli, 2,500. The gentleman with number 17? The gentleman with number 17 was suddenly seized under the armpits by 2 burly thugs who had entered the room unnoticed. "You're Osa Fuerte, known as Needle," drawled a third thug, tapping the arrested man in the chest with a club. "A hired killer with a warrant issued for his apprehension. You are under arrest. Take him away."
3,000!
yelled Eurosa Fuerte, known as Needle, waving the sign with the number 17 that he was still holding.
3,000!
"I'm sorry," said Abner de Navarrete coldly. "It's the rules. A bidder's offer is cancelled on the event of his arrest. The current bid is 2,500 offered by the Honourable Master Cianfanelli. Do I hear a higher bid? Count Horvath, 2,600. The gentleman in the mask, 2,700. The Honourable Master Cianfanelli, 3,000. Going once? Going twice?
4,000.
Oh, the Honourable Molnar Giancardi. Bravo! 4,000 crowns. Do I hear 4,500?
I wanted them for my son,
snapped Nino Cianfanelli.
And you have only daughters, Molnar. What do you want with those swords?
Ah, well, have it your own way. I yield. Sold, declared de Navarrete, to the Honourable Master Molnar Giancardi for 4,000 crowns. Let us go on, noble ladies and gentlemen. Lot number 11, a cloak of monkey fur. Nikifor Moors, joyful and grinning like a weasel in a chicken coop, slapped Anteoderis on the back. Hard. Only the last remnants of her will prevented Antea from punching him in the mouth. "We're leaving," she hissed. "And the money?" "After the auction is over and the formalities have been completed, that will take some time." Ignoring the grumbling of Nicephor Moors, Antea walked towards the door. She was aware of somebody observing her, and glanced surreptitiously. A woman, with black hair, attired in black and white, with an obsidian star hanging in her cleavage. She felt a shiver. Antea had been right. The formalities did take some time. They could only go to the bank 2 days later. It was a branch of one of the dwarven banks, smelling, like all the others, of money, wax, and mahogany panelling. "The sum to be paid is 3,366 crowns, declared the clerk, after subtracting the bank's charges of 1%. "The Borsity's 15, the bank 1, growled Nicephor Moors. "They take a cut from everything. Daylight robbery. Hand over the cash." "One moment." Antea stopped him. "First, let's sort out our affairs, yours and mine. I'm also due a commission of 400 crowns. "Hold on, yelled Moors, attracting the gaze of other clerks and customers. "What 400? I barely got 3,000 and a few pennies from the Borsitys." "According to the contract, I'm owed 10% of the sale price. The costs are your affair, and they apply only to you." "What are you—" Antea Derris looked at him. That was enough. There wasn't much resemblance between Antea and her father, but Antea could glare just like he did, just like Pyrrell Pratt. Moors cringed beneath her gaze. "Please make out a cheque for 400 crowns from the sum to be paid," she instructed the clerk. "I know the bank takes a commission. I accept that." "And my dough in cash?" The court scribe pointed to the large leather satchel he was lugging. "I'll take it home and hide it away safely. No thieving banks are going to fleece me for a commission." "It's a considerable sum," said the clerk, standing up. "Please, wait here." As he left the counter, the clerk opened the door leading to the rear for a moment. But Antea could have sworn that for a second she saw a black-haired woman dressed in black and white. She felt a shiver. "Thank you, Molnar," said Yennefer. "I won't forget this favour." "What are you thanking me for?" smiled Molnar Junkiardi. "What have I done? What service have I rendered? That I bought a certain lot at auction? Paying for it with money from your private account? And perhaps that I turned away when you cast that spell a moment ago? I turned away because I was watching that agent from the window as she walked away, gracefully swaying this and that. She's a dame to my taste, I don't deny it, although I'm not fond of human females. Will your spell cause her problems too?" "No," interrupted the sorceress. "Nothing will happen to her. She took a cheque, not gold." "Indeed. You will take away the witch's swords at once, I presume. After all, to him they mean everything." Yennefer completed his sentence. "He's bound to them by destiny." "I know. I know, indeed. He told me, and I've begun to believe it. No, Molnar, I won't take the swords today. They can remain in the safe deposit. I'll soon send an authorized person to collect them. I leave Novigrad this very day." "As do I. I'm riding to Tretogor. I have to inspect the branch there. Then I'm going home to Gorsvelen." "Well, thank you once again. Farewell, O dwarf."
"Farewell, O sorceress."
Interlude. Precisely 100 hours after the gold was taken from the Jankadi's bank in Novigrad.
"You're banned from entry,"
said the doorman Tarp.
"and well aware of that. Move away from the steps."
"Ever seen this, peasant?" Nicephor Moors shook and jingled a fat pouch. "Ever seen so much gold at one time? Out of my way! A nobleman is coming through, a wealthy lord. Stand aside, churl!"
"Let him in, Tarp."
Phoebus Ravenga emerged from inside the osteria. "I don't want any disturbance here. The customers are growing anxious, and you, beware. You've cheated me once, there won't be a second time. You'd better have the means to pay this time, Moors." "Mr. Moors?" The scribe shoved Tarp aside. "Mister! Beware how you address me, innkeeper. Wine, he cried, lounging back in a chair. The dearest you have.
Our dearest cost 60 crowns, the maitre d'hotel stated gravely.
I can afford it. Give me a whole jug and pronto.
Be quiet, Ravenga admonished him. Be quiet, Moors.
Don't silence me, mountebank, trickster, upstart. Who are you to silence me? A gilded sign, but with muck still on your boots, and shit will always be shit. Take a look here. Ever seen so much gold at one time? Well?
Nicephore Moors reached into the pouch, pulled out a handful of gold coins, and tossed them contemptuously on the table. The coins landed with a splash, melting into a brown gunk. A ghastly stench of excrement spread around. The customers of the Natura Rerum Osteria leapt to their feet and dashed for the exit, choking and covering their noses with napkins. The maitre d'hotel bent over and retched. There was a scream and a curse. Phoebus Ravenga didn't even twitch. He stood like a statue, arms crossed on his chest. Moors, dumbfounded, shook his head, goggled and rubbed his eyes, staring at the stinking pile of shit on the tablecloth. He finally roused himself and reached into the pouch, and pulled out a handful of soft gunk. "You're right, Moors," said Phoebus Ravenga in an icy voice. "Shit will always be shit. Into the courtyard with him." The court scribe didn't even put up any resistance as he was hauled away, too bewildered by what had happened. Tarp dragged him to the outhouse. At a sign from Ravenga, 2 servants removed the wooden cover of the latrine. Moors became animated at the sight and began to yell, struggle, and kick. It didn't help much. Tarp hauled him to the earth closet and threw him down the opening. The young man tumbled into the sloppy excrement. But he didn't go under. He spread out his arms and legs and held his head up, keeping himself on the surface of the muck, with his arms on bunches of straw, rags, sticks, and crumpled pages from various learned and pious books. Phoebus Ravenga took down from the wall of the granary a wooden pitchfork made from a single forked branch. "Shit was, is, and will remain shit," he said, "and always ends up where shit is." He pressed down on the pitchfork and submerged Moors completely. Moors broke the surface, roaring, coughing, and spitting. Ravenga let him cough a little and get his breath back, and then submerged him again, this time much deeper. After repeating the operation several times, he threw down the pitchfork. "Leave him," he ordered. "Let him crawl out by himself." "That won't be easy," adjudged Tarp, "and it'll take some time." "Let it. There's no rush." À mon retour, je m'en désespère. Tu m'as reçu d'un baiser tout glacé. Pierre de Ronsard. Chapter 16. Just at that moment, the Novigradian schooner Pandora Parvi, a beautiful ship indeed, was sailing to its mooring place under full sail. Beautiful and swift, thought Geralt, descending the gangway onto the busy wharf. He had seen the schooner in Novigrad, asked around, and knew it had set sail from there 2 whole days after the galley Stinter on which he had sailed. In spite of that, he had essentially reached Kerak at the same time. "Perhaps I ought to have waited and boarded the schooner," he thought. 2 days more in Novigrad. Who knows? Perhaps I would have acquired some more information. Vain digressions, he decided. Perhaps, who knows, maybe. What has happened has happened. Nothing can change it now, and there's no sense going on about it. With a glance, he bade farewell to the schooner, the lighthouse, the sea, and the horizon darkening with storm clouds. Then he set off for the town at a brisk pace. Just at that moment, 2 porters were coming out, carrying a sedan chair, a dainty construction with delicate lilac curtains. It had to be Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. On those days, Litternaire saw patients, usually wealthy, upper-class ladies who arrived in sedan chairs like that. The doorman let him in without a word. Just as well. Geralt wasn't in the best of moods, and would certainly have retaliated with a word, or even 2 or 3. The patio was deserted,
and the water in the fountain burbled softly. There was a carafe and some cups on a small malachite table. Without further ado, Geralt poured himself a cup. When he raised his head, he saw Motzaik in a white coat and apron, pale, with her hair slicked down. "It's you," she said. "You're back."
"It certainly is," he confirmed dryly. "I most certainly am. And this wine is most certainly a little sour."
"Such a pleasure seeing you again."
"Coral? Is she here? And if so, where?"
"I saw her between the thighs of a patient a moment ago." She shrugged. "She's most certainly still there."
"You indeed have no choice, Motzaik," he responded calmly, looking her in the eyes. "You'll have to become a sorceress. In sooth, you have a great predisposition for it, and the makings of one. Your caustic wit wouldn't be appreciated in a weaving manufactory, nor yet in a bawdy house."
"I'm learning and growing." She withstood his gaze. "I don't cry myself to sleep any longer. I've done all my crying. I'm over that stage."
No, you're not. You're deluding yourself. There's still a lot ahead of you, and sarcasm won't protect you from it, especially as it's forced and a pale imitation. But enough of that. It's not my job to give you lessons in life. I asked where Coral was.
"Here. Greetings." The sorceress emerged from behind a curtain like a ghost. Like Motzaik, she was wearing a white doctor's coat, and her red hair was pinned up and hidden by a linen cap, which in ordinary circumstances he would have thought ridiculous. But the circumstances weren't ordinary, and laughter would have been out of place. He needed a few seconds to understand that. She walked over and kissed him on the cheek without a word. Her lips were cold, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She smelled of medicine, and the fluid she used as disinfectant. It was a nasty, repulsive, morbid scent, a scent full of fear. "I'll see you tomorrow," she forestalled him. "Tomorrow I'll tell you everything."
"Tomorrow?"
She looked at him, and it was a faraway look, from beyond the chasm of time and events between them. He needed a few seconds to understand how deep that chasm was, and how remote were the events separating them. "Maybe the day after tomorrow would be better. Go to town. Meet that poet. He's been worried about you. But now go, please. I have to see a patient." After she had gone, he glanced at Motzaik, probably meaningfully enough for her not to delay with an explanation. "We had a birth this morning," she said, and her voice was a little different. "A difficult one. She decided to use forceps, and everything that could have gone badly did."
"I understand."
"I doubted."
"Goodbye, Motzaik."
"You were away for a long time." She raised her head. Much longer than she had expected. At Risberg, they didn't know anything, or at least pretended not to. Something happened, didn't it?
"Yes, it did."
"I understand."
"I doubt it."
Dandelion impressed with his intelligence, by stating something so obvious that Geralt was still unable to completely adjust himself to it, or completely accept it. "It's the end, isn't it? Gone with the wind? Of course, she and the sorcerers needed you. You've done the job, now you can go. And know what? I'm glad it's happening now. You had to finish that bizarre affair sometime, and the longer it went on, the more dangerous the consequences were potentially becoming. If you want to know my opinion, you should also be glad it's over, and that it went so smoothly. You should then dress your countenance in a joyful smile, not a saturnine and gloomy grimace, which, believe me, doesn't suit you at all. With it, you look quite simply like a man with a serious hangover, who, to cap it all, has got food poisoning and doesn't remember when he broke a tooth, and on what, or how he got the semen stains on his breeches. Or perhaps your melancholy results from something else," continued the bard, completely undaunted by the witch's lack of reaction. "If only from the fact that you were thrown out on your ear when you were planning a finale in your own inimitable style. The one with the flight at dawn and flowers on the bedside table? Being in love is like being at war, my friend, and your beloved behaved like an expert strategist. She acted preemptively, with a preventative strike. She must have read Marshal Pellegrim's The History of Warfare. Pellegrim cites many examples of victories won using a similar stratagem. Geralt still didn't react. It was apparent that Dandelion didn't expect a reaction. He finished his beer and gestured to the innkeeper's wife to bring another. "Taking the above into consideration," he continued, twisting the pegs of his lute, "I'm generally in favour of sex on the first date. In the future, I'd recommend it to you in every respect. It eliminates the necessity of any further rendezvous with the same person, which can be wearisome and time-consuming. While we're on the subject, the lady lawyer you recommended turned out indeed to be worth the bother. You wouldn't believe—" "I would," the Witcher spat, interrupting him quite bluntly. "I can believe it without hearing an account, so you can give it a miss." "Indeed," the bard noted. "Dejected, distressed, and consumed by care, owing to which you're tetchy and brusque. It's not just the woman, it seems to me. There's something else. I know it, damn it, and see it. Did you fail in Novigrad? Didn't you get your swords back?" Geralt sighed, although he had promised himself he wouldn't. "No, I didn't. It was too late. There were complications and various things took place. We were caught by a storm, then our boat began to ship water, and then a certain glove-maker was taken seriously ill. I won't bore you with the details. In brief, I didn't make it in time. When I reached Novigrad, the auction was over. They gave me short shrift at the Bossides. The auctions are shrouded in commercial confidentiality, protecting both the sellers and the buyers. The company doesn't issue any information to outsiders. Blah, blah, blah. Farewell, sir. I didn't find anything out. I don't know whether the swords were sold, and if so, who purchased them. I don't even know if the thief put the swords up for auction at all, for he might have ignored Pratt's advice. Another opportunity might have occurred. I don't know anything." "Too bad." Dandelion shook his head. "It's a streak of unfortunate incidents. Cousin Ferrol's investigation is at a standstill, it seems to me. Cousin Ferrol, while we're on the subject, asks about you endlessly. Where you are, whether I have any tidings from you when you're returning, whether you'll make it to the royal nuptials in time, whether you've forgotten your promise to Prince Egmont. Naturally, I haven't said a word about your endeavours or the auction, but the holiday of Lunasa, I remind you, is getting closer. Only 10 days remain." "I know, but perhaps something will happen in the meantime. Something lucky, let's say. After the streak of unfortunate incidents, we could do with a change." "I don't deny it, but if I'll think it over and make a decision." Geralt didn't let the bard finish. "Nothing in principle binds me to appear at the royal nuptials as his bodyguard. Egmont and the instigator didn't recover my swords, and that was the condition. But I absolutely don't rule out fulfilling the ducal wish. Material considerations, if nothing else, argue for it. The prince boasted he wouldn't skimp on a penny, and everything suggests that I'll be needing new swords, bespoke ones, and that will cost a great deal. What can I say? Let's go and eat, and drink." "To the Natura in Ravenna?" "Not today. Today I feel like simple, natural, uncomplicated and honest things, if you know what I mean." "Of course I do," said Dandelion, standing up. "Let's go down to the sea, to Palmyra. I know a place there. They serve herrings, vodka and soup made from a fish called the big-head carp. Don't laugh. That really is its name." "They can call themselves whatever they want. Let's go." The bridge over the Adelat was blocked, for at that very moment a column of laden wagons and a troop of horsemen pulling riderless horses were passing over it. Geralt and Dandelion had to wait and step out of the way. A rider on a bay mare brought up the rear of the cavalcade. The mare tossed her head and greeted Geralt with a long drawn-out neigh. "Roach!" "Greetings, Witcher," said the horseman, removing his hood to reveal his face. "I was just coming to visit you, although I hadn't expected we'd bump into each other so soon." "Greetings, Pinety." Pinety dismounted. Geralt noticed he was armed. It was quite strange, since mages almost never bore arms. A sword in a richly decorated scabbard was hanging from the sorcerer's brass-studded belt. There was also a dagger, solid and broad. He took Roach's reins from the sorcerer and stroked the mare's nostrils and mane. Pinety took off his gloves and stuck them into his belt. "Please forgive me, Master Dandelion," he said, "but I'd like to be alone with Geralt. What I must say to him is meant for his ears only." "Geralt has no secrets before me," Dandelion said, puffing himself up. "I know. I learned many details of his private life from your ballads. But, Dandelion, the witch interrupted, take a walk. Thank you, he said when they were alone. Thank you for bringing me my horse, Pinety. I observed that you were attached to her, replied the sorcerer. So, when I found her in Pine Tops... You were in Pine Tops? We were. Constable Torquil summoned us. Did you see? We did. Pinety cut him off curtly. We saw everything. I don't understand, Witcher. I don't understand. Why didn't you hack him to death when you could, on the spot? You didn't act too prudently, if I may say so. I know, thought Geralt to himself. I know, how well I know. I turned out to be too stupid to take advantage of the chance fate had given me. For what harm would there have been in that? One more corpse in the statistics? What does that mean to a hired killer? So what if it sickened me to be your tool? I'm always somebody's tool, after all. I ought to have gritted my teeth and done what had to be done. This is sure to astonish you, said Pinety, looking him in the eyes. But we immediately came to help, Harlan and I. We guessed you were in need of assistance. We caught Dandelion the following day when he was tearing apart some random gang. You caught him, the Witcher thought to himself, and broke his neck without thinking twice. Since you're cleverer than me, you didn't repeat my mistake. Like hell you didn't. If it had been like that, you wouldn't be wearing a face like that now, Gwyncamp. We aren't murderers, stammered the sorcerer, blushing. We hauled him off to Risberg and caused a mild commotion. Everybody was against us. Ortolan astonishingly behaved cautiously, and we'd actually expected the worst from him. But Biruta Ikati, pockmarked Axel, Sandoval, even Sanginis, who had previously been on our side. We had to listen to a lengthy lecture about the solidarity of the Fellowship, about fraternity, about loyalty. We learned that only utter good-for-nothings send hired killers after confraters, that you have to fall very low to hire a witcher to go after a comrade, for low reasons. Out of envy for our comrade's talent and prestige, jealousy over his scientific achievements and successes. Citing the incidents in the hills and the 44 corpses achieved nothing, the Witcher thought to himself, unless you count shrugs of the shoulders, and probably a lengthy lecture about science and the need to make sacrifices, about the end justifying the means. Dandelion, Pinety continued, was hauled before the Commission and dealt a severe reprimand for practising Goetia for the people killed by the demon. He was haughty, clearly counting on an intervention by Ortolan. But Ortolan had somehow forgotten about him, having devoted himself utterly to a fresh new passion, developing a formula for an extremely effective and universal manure meant to revolutionize agriculture. Left to fend for himself, Dandelion struck a different tone. Tearful and pathetic, he played the victim, a victim in equal measure of his own ambition and magical talent, owing to which he evoked a demon so powerful it was uncontrollable. He swore to abandon the practice of Goetia, that he would never touch it again, that he would utterly devote himself to research into perfecting the human species, into transhumanism, speciation, introgression, and genetic modification. And they lent credence to him, the Witcher thought to himself. They lent credence to him. Ortolan, who suddenly appeared before the Commission, stinking of manure, influenced them. He denominated Dandelion a dear youth, who had admittedly committed grievous miscalculations, but who is infallible. He didn't doubt that the youth would calibrate himself, and that he would vouch for it. He asked for the Commission to temper its ire, to show compassion, and not excoriate the youth. He finally promulgated Dandelion his heir and successor, fully transferring his private laboratory in the Citadel to him. He himself, he declared, didn't need a laboratory, for he had resolved to toil and take exercise under the open sky, on vegetable patches and flower beds. This plan appealed to Biruta, pockmarked Axel, and the rest. The Citadel, bearing in mind its inaccessibility, could successfully be considered a place of correction. Dandelion had ensnared himself. He found himself under house arrest. And the affair was swept under the carpet, the Witcher thought to himself. I suspect that consideration for you and your reputation had an influence on it, said Pinety, looking at him keenly. Geralt raised his eyebrows. Your Witcher code, continued the sorcerer, reportedly forbids the killing of people. But it is said about you that you don't treat the code with due reverence, that this and that has occurred, that several people have departed this life thanks to you. Biruta and the others got cold feet, fearing that you'd return to Risberg and finish the job, and that they were in line for a beating too. But the citadel is a fully secure refuge, a former gnomish mountain fortress converted into a laboratory and currently under magical protection. No one can get into the citadel. There is no possibility. Daggerland is thus not only isolated, but also safe.
Risberg is also safe, the Witcher thought to himself. Safe from scandals and embarrassment. With Daggerland in isolation, there's no scandal. No one will ever know that the crafty bastard and careerist tricked and led up the garden path the sorcerers of Risberg, who believe themselves and declare themselves to be the elite of the magical fraternity. Or know that a degenerate psychopath took advantage of the naivety and stupidity of that elite, and managed, without any hindrance, to kill almost 4 dozen people.
Daggerland will be under supervision and observation in the citadel, the sorcerer said, looking him in the eye the whole time. He won't call forth any demon.
There never was a demon, and you, Pinity, know that only too well.
The citadel, said the sorcerer, looking away and observing the ships at anchor, is built into the rock of the Mount Cremora Massif, at the foot of which lies Risberg. An attempt to storm it would be tantamount to suicide, not only owing to the magical protection. Do you remember what you told us back then, about that possessed person whom you once killed? In case of absolute necessity, protecting one good at the cost of another, precluding the lawlessness of a forbidden deed in the process. Well, you must understand that the circumstances are now quite different. In isolation, Daggerland doesn't represent a genuine or direct threat. Were you to lay a finger on him, you would be committing a forbidden and lawless deed. Were you to try to kill him, you would go to court accused of attempted murder. Some of our people, I happen to know, hope you will nonetheless try, and end up on the scaffold. So I advise you, let it go. Forget about Daggerland. Leave it to run its course. You say nothing. Pinity stated a fact. You're keeping your comments to yourself.
Because there's nothing to say. I'm only curious about one thing. You and Zara. Will you remain at Risberg?
Pinity laughed, dryly and hollowly. Both Harlan and I were asked to tender our resignation at our own request, by virtue of our state of health. We left Risberg, and we'll never return there. Harlan is going to Povis to serve King Rid, and I'm inclined to continue travelling. In the Empire of Nilfgaard, I hear, they treat mages functionally and without undue respect, but they pay them well. And while we're on the subject of Nilfgaard, I almost forgot. I have a farewell gift for you, Witcher. He undid his baldric, wrapped it around the scabbard, and handed the sword to Geralt. It's for you, he said before the Witcher could speak. I received it on my 16th birthday, from my father, who couldn't get over the fact that I'd decided to study magic. He hoped the gift would influence me, and that, as the owner of such a weapon, I would feel obliged to continue the family tradition and choose a military career. Why, I disappointed my father. In everything. I didn't like hunting. I preferred angling. I didn't marry the only daughter of his closest friend. I didn't become a military man, and the sword gathered dust in a cupboard. I have no need of it. It will serve you better. But, Pinity, take it. Don't make a fuss. I know your swords went missing, and you're in need. Geralt grasped the lizard-skin hilt and drew the blade halfway out of the scabbard. 1 inch above the crossguard, he saw a punch in the shape of the sun in its glory, with 16 rays alternating straight and wavy, symbolizing heraldically the light and heat of the sun. A beautifully executed inscription in stylized lettering, a famous trademark, began 2 inches beyond the sun.
A blade from Viraleda.
The Witcher stated a fact, this time authentic. I beg your pardon.
Nothing. I'm admiring it, and I still don't know if I can accept it.
You can. In principle, you already have received it, since you're holding it. Hellspells, don't make a fuss, I said. I'm giving you the sword because I like you, so that you'll realize not every sorcerer has it in for you. Anyway, the fishing rods are more use to me. The rivers are beautiful and crystal clear in Nilfgaard. There's plenty of trout and salmon in them.
Thank you. Pinity. Yes? Are you giving me the sword purely because of liking me? Why, because I like you indeed. The sorcerer lowered his voice. But perhaps not only. What does it bother me what happens here, and what purposes the sword will serve? I'm leaving these parts, never to return. You see that splendid galleon lying at anchor? It's Giureali. Its home port is Bacala. I sail the day after tomorrow. You arrived a little early. Yes, said the mage, stammering slightly. I wanted to say goodbye to someone. Good luck. Thanks for the sword. And for the horse. Thanks again. Farewell, Pinity. Farewell. The sorcerer shook Geralt's extended hand without thinking. Farewell, Witcher. He found Dandelion, where else, in the portside tavern, slurping fish soup from a bowl. I'm leaving, he announced briefly. Right away. Right away? Dandelion froze with the spoon halfway to his mouth. Right now? I thought... It doesn't matter what you thought. I ride immediately. Reassure your cousin, the instigator. I'll be back for the royal nuptials. What's that? What does it look like? A sword, naturally. Where did you get it? From the sorcerer, was it? And the one I gave you? Where's that? It got lost. Return to the upper town, Dandelion. What about Coral? What about Coral? What do I say if she asks? She won't. She won't have time. She'll be saying farewell to somebody. Interlude. Confidential. Illustrissimus et reverendissimus Magnus Magister Narcisse de la Roche, the head of the chapter of the Gift and the Art, Novigrad. Datum, ex Castello Risberg, DA 15 mens, Jul anno 1245, post resurrectionem. Re, Master of the Arts, Sorel Albert Amador Degalund. Honoratissime Grandmaster. Rumours about the incidents which occurred on the western borders of Temeria in the summer of Anno Corrente have doubtless reached the ears of the chapter. The result of the said incidents, presumably, is that around 40, it is impossible to state precisely, persons, mainly unschooled forestry labourers, lost their lives. These incidents are associated, regrettably, with the person of Master Sorel Albert Amador Degalund, a member of the research team at the Risberg Complex. The research team of the Risberg Complex is united in sympathy with the families of the victims of the incidents, although the victims, who stand very low in the social hierarchy, abusing alcohol and leading immoral lives, were probably not in legalized unions. We wish to remind the chapter that Master Degalund, a pupil and acolyte of Grandmaster Ortolan, is an outstanding scientist, a specialist in the field of genetics, boasting immense, simply incalculable accomplishments in transhumanism, introgression, and speciation. The research that Master Degalund is conducting may turn out to be pivotal for the development and evolution of the human race. As is known, the human race is no match for the non-human races in terms of many physical, psychological, and psychomagical traits. Master Degalund's experiments, based on the hybridization and combination of the gene pool, are intended, in the beginning, to equalize the human race with non-human races, while, in the long term, by the application of speciation, to permit humans to dominate non-humans and subdue them utterly. It is probably unnecessary to explain what cardinal significance this matter has. It would be inadvisable for some trifling incidents to impede or stop the above-mentioned scientific studies. As far as Master Degalund himself is concerned, the research team of the Risberg Complex takes full responsibility for his medical care. Master Degalund was previously diagnosed with narcissistic tendencies, absence of empathy, and slight emotional disturbances. During the time preceding the perpetration of the acts he is accused of, the condition intensified until symptoms of bipolar disorder occurred. It may be stated that, at the time the acts he is accused of were committed, Master Degalund was not in control of his emotional reactions, and his ability to differentiate between good and evil was impaired. It may be assumed that Degalund was non compos mentis, eo ipso, was temporarily insane.
Hence, he cannot take criminal responsibility for the acts ascribed to him, since impune est admittendum quod perfurorum alicuius accidit. Master Dandelion has been placed ad interim in a secret locality where he is being treated and is continuing his research. Since we consider the matter closed, we wish to draw the chapter's attention to Constable Torquil, who is conducting the investigation into the matter of the Temerian incidents. Constable Torquil, a subordinate of the bailiff in Gauls Velen, otherwise known as a diligent functionary and staunch defender of law, is exhibiting excessive zeal as regards the incidents in the above-mentioned settlements, and is following, from our point of view, a decidedly inappropriate trail. His superiors ought to be persuaded to temper his enthusiasm, and were that not to be effective, it would be worth investigating the personal files of the constable, his wife, parents, grandparents, children, and other members of his family, paying special attention to his private life, past, criminal record, material affairs, and sexual preferences. We suggest contacting the law firm of Codringer and Fenn, whose services, if I may remind the chapter, were taken advantage of 3 years ago, with the aim of discrediting and ridiculing the witnesses in the case known as the Corn Affair. Item. We would like to draw the chapter's attention to the fact that, unfortunately, the witcher, called Geralt of Rivia, has become embroiled in the matter in question. He had direct access to the incidents in the settlements, and we also have reason to suppose that he connects those events with Master Dandelion. The said witcher ought also to be silenced should he begin to delve too deeply into the matter. We would like to point out that the asocial attitude, nihilism, emotional instability, and chaotic personality of the aforementioned witcher may mean that a stark warning may prove to be non sufficit, and extreme measures will turn out to be necessary. The witcher is under permanent surveillance, and we are prepared to apply such measures if, naturally, the chapter approves and orders it. In hopes that the above explanation will turn out to be sufficient for the chapter to close the matter, Bene Valere Optimus, and we remain yours sincerely, on behalf of the Risberg Complex Research Team, Semper Fidelis Vestrarum Bona Amica, Biruta Animarcet Icarte, Mano Propria. Chapter 17.
Just in time, said Franz Torquil morosely. You made it on time, Witcher. Right on time. The spectacle's about to begin.
He lay on his back on a bed, as pale as a whitewashed wall, his hair wet with sweat and plastered to his forehead. He was wearing nothing but a coarse linen shirt that had once reminded Geralt of a winding sheet. His left thigh was swathed down to the knee in a blood-soaked bandage. A table had been put in the centre of the room and covered in a sheet. A squat individual in a black jerkin was setting out tools on the table, one after the other in turn. Knives, forceps, chisels, saws.
I regret but one thing, said Torquil, grinding his teeth, that I didn't catch the horsens. It was the gods' will. It wasn't written for me. And now it won't come to pass. What happened? A sodding same as in Uhtred, Rogovitsner and Pinetufts, except it wasn't like the others, but at the very edge of the forest. And not in a clearing, but on the highway. They'd surprised some travellers. They'd killed 3 and abducted 2 bairns. As luck would have it, I was nearby with my men. We gave chase at once, soon had them in sight. 2 great bruises as big as oxen, and 1 misshapen hunchback. And that hunchback shot me with a crossbow.
The constable gritted his teeth and waved a hand at his bandaged thigh.
I ordered my men to leave me and follow them. They disobeyed the curs, and as a result they made off. And me? So what if they saved me when they're cutting my leg off now? I'd rather have fucking pegged it there, but seen them uns kicking their legs on the scaffold before my eyes clouded over. The wretches didn't obey my orders. Now they're sitting there, hangdog.
To a man, the constable's subordinates were indeed sitting shamefacedly on a bench by the wall. They were accompanied by a wrinkled old woman with a garland on her head that didn't match her grey hair at all, who looked completely out of place. "We can begin," said the man in the black jerkin. "Put the patient on the table and strap him down tightly. All outsiders to leave the chamber."
"They can stay," growled Torquil. "I want to know they're watching. I'll be too ashamed to scream."
"One moment," Geralt said, straightening up.
Who decided that amputation is inevitable?
I did,
said the man in black, also drawing himself up to his full height, but having to lift his head up high to look Geralt in the face. I'm Messer Lupi, physician to the bailiff in Gors-Velen, specially sent for. An examination has confirmed that the wound is infected. The leg has to go. There's no hope for it.
How much do you charge for this procedure?
20 crowns.
Here's 30,
said Geralt, digging 3 10-crown coins from a pouch.
Take your instruments, pack up and return to the bailiff. Should he ask, say the patient is improving.
But I must protest.
Get packed and return.
Which of those words don't you understand? And you, Nana, to me, unwind the bandage.
He forbade me from touching the patient,
she said, nodding at the court physician.
Says I'm a quack and a witch, threatened to inform on me.
Ignore him. Indeed, he's just leaving.
The old woman, whom Geralt at once recognized as a herbalist, did as she was told. She unwound the bandage with great care, but it was enough to make Torquil shake his head, hiss and groan.
Geralt, he groaned, what are you playing at? The physician said there's no hope. Better to lose a leg than my life. Bullshit. It's not better at all, and now shut up.
The wound looked hideous, but Geralt had seen worse. He took a box from the pouch containing elixirs. Messer Lupi, now packed, looked on, shaking his head. Those decocts are fit for nothing, he announced. Those quack tricks and that bogus magic is fit for nothing. It's nothing but charlatanism. As a physician, I must protest. Geralt turned around and stared. The physician exited, in a hurry, tripping over the doorstop.
4 men to me,
said the Witcher, uncorking a vial.
Hold him fast. Clench your teeth, Franz.
The elixir foamed copiously as it was poured over the wound. The constable groaned heartrendingly. Geralt waited a while, and then poured on another elixir. That one also foamed, and hissed and smoked as well. Torquil screamed, tossed his head around, tensed up, rolled his eyes, and fainted. The old woman took a canteen from her bundle, scooped out a handful of green ointment, smeared it thickly on a piece of folded linen, and applied it to the wound.
Nipbone,
guessed Geralt.
A poultice of nipbone, arnica and marigold. Good, Nana. Very good. Goatweed and oak bark would also come in use.
Hearken in,
interrupted the old woman, without raising her head from the constable's leg.
Trying to teach me herbalism. I was healing people with herbs when you were still puking your porridge over your wet nurse, laddie. And you lummoxes, away with you, for you're blocking out the light. And you stink dreadfully. You ought to change your foot wraps from time to time. Out with you, hear me?
His leg will have to be immobilized, set in long splints.
Don't instruct me, I said. And get you gone as well. Why are you still here? What are you waiting for? For thanks that you nobly gave up your magical witcher medicaments? For a promise that you won't forget it till his dying day?
I want to ask him something. Promise me, Geralt, that you'll catch them, said Franz Torquil, suddenly quite lucid. That you won't let them off.
I'll give him a sleeping draught and something for the fever, because he's raving. And you, Witcher, get out. Wait in the yard.
He didn't have to wait long. The old woman came out, hitched up her dress, and straightened her crooked garland. She sat beside him on the step, and rubbed one foot against the other. She had extremely small feet.
He's sleeping, she announced, and will probably live, if nothing evil sets in, touch wood. The bone will knit. You saved his pin with them witcher charms. He'll always be lame, and he'll never mount a horse again, I dare say. But 2 legs are better than 1.
She reached into her bosom beneath her embroidered sheepskin vest, making the air smell even more strongly of herbs. She drew out a wooden casket and opened it. After a moment's hesitation, she proffered it to Geralt.
Want a snort?
No, thank you. I don't use fish neck.
But I,
said the herbalist, sniffing up the drug, first into one, then the other nostril.
But I do, from time to time. Sharpens up the mind like no one's bloody business. Increases longevity, and improves the looks. Just look at me.
He did.
Thanking you for the witcher medicaments for Franz, she said,
wiping a watering eye and sniffing.
I won't forget it. I know you jealously guard those decocts of yours. and you gave them to me without a second thought, even though you may run short when you're next to need. Aren't you afraid?
I am.
She turned her head to show her profile. She must indeed have been a beautiful woman once, a long time ago. And now? She turned to face him. Speak. You meant to ask Franz something.
Never mind. He's sleeping, and it's time I was off.
Speak.
Mount Cremora.
You should have said. What do you want to know about that mountain? The cottage stood quite far outside the village, hard by the wall of the forest, which began just beyond a fence surrounding an orchard full of small trees laden with apples. The rest had all the hallmarks of a typical homestead. A barn, a shed, a henhouse, several beehives, a vegetable patch, and a muck heap. A thin trail of white, pleasant-smelling smoke was wafting from the chimney. The guinea fowl, scurrying around by the wattle fencing, noticed him first, raising the alarm with a hellish screeching. Some children, playing in the farmyard, dashed towards the cottage. A woman appeared in the doorway, tall, fair-haired, and wearing an apron over a coarse linen frock. He rode closer and dismounted.
"Greetings," he said. "Is the man of the house at home?"
The children, all of them little girls, clung to their mother's skirts and apron. The woman looked at the Witcher, and any search for friendliness in those eyes would have been in vain. No wonder. She caught a good sight of the sword hilt over his shoulder, of the medallion on his neck, and of the silver studs on his gloves, which the Witcher was by no means hiding. Rather, he was flaunting them.
"The man of the house," he repeated. "I mean Otto Dussart. I want to talk to him about something."
"What?"
"It's private. Is he at home?"
She stared at him in silence, slightly tilting her head. She had rustic looks, and he guessed she might be aged anything between 25 and 45. A more precise assessment, as with the majority of village women, was impossible.
"Is he at home?"
"No."
"Then I'll wait until he returns," he said,
tossing the mare's reins over a pole. "You might have to wait a while."
"I'll hold out somehow. Although, in truth, I'd prefer to wait inside than by the fence."
The woman eyed him up and down for a moment. Him and his medallion. "Accept our invitation, guest," she said finally. "Step inside."
"Gladly," he answered, using the customary formula. "I won't transgress the rules of hospitality."
"You won't,"
she repeated, in a slow, drawling voice.
"Yet you wear a sword."
"Such is my profession."
"Swords injure and kill."
"So does life. Does the invitation still apply?"
"Please enter." One entered, typically for such homesteads, through a gloomy, cluttered passage. The main chamber turned out to be quite spacious, light and clean, with only the walls near the range and chimney bearing sooty streaks. Otherwise, the walls were painted freshly white and decorated with gaily embroidered wall hangings. Various household utensils, bunches of herbs, plats of garlic and strings of capsicums enlivened the walls. A woven curtain separated the chamber from the larder. It smelt of cooking. Cabbage, to be precise. "Please be seated." The housewife remained standing, crumpling her apron in her hands. The children crouched by the stove on a low bench. The medallion on Geralt's neck was vibrating, powerfully and constantly. It fluttered under his shirt like a captured bird. "You ought to have left the sword in the passage," the woman said, walking over to the range. "It's indecent to sit down to table with a weapon. Only brigands do so. Be you a brigand?"
"You know who I am."
He cut her off.
"And the sword stays where it is, to act as a reminder."
"Of what?"
"That hasty actions have perilous consequences."
"There's no weapons here, so—"
Yes, he interrupted bluntly. "Let's not kid ourselves, missus. A peasant's cottage and farmyard is an arsenal. Many have died from hoes, not to mention flails and pitchforks. I heard that someone was killed with the plunger from a butter churn. You can do harm with anything if you want to, or have to. And while we're on the subject, leave that pot of boiling water alone and move away from the stove.
I meant nothing, the woman said quickly, evidently lying. And it's not boiling water, it's borscht. I meant to offer you some.
No, thank you. I'm not hungry. So don't touch the pot and move away from the stove. Sit down by the children, and we'll wait nicely for the man of the house.
They sat in a silence, broken only by the buzzing of flies. The medallion twitched. A pan of cabbage in the oven is almost ready, said the woman, interrupting the awkward silence. I must take it out and stir it, or it'll burn.
Her.
Geralt pointed to the smallest of the girls.
She can do it.
The girl stood up slowly, glaring at him from under a flaxen fringe. She took hold of a long-handled fork and bent over towards the stove door, and suddenly launched herself at Geralt like a she-cat. She aimed to pin him by his neck to the wall with the fork, but he dodged, jerked the fork handle, and knocked her over. She began to metamorphosize before even hitting the floor. The woman and the other two girls had already managed to transform. 3 wolves, a grey she-wolf and 2 cubs, bounded towards the Witcher, with bloodshot eyes and bared fangs. They bounded apart, quite like wolves, attacking from all sides. He dodged, shoved the bench at the she-wolf, fending the cubs away with blows of his fists in his silver-studded gloves. They howled and flattened themselves against the floor, baring their fangs. The she-wolf howled savagely and leapt again. No, Edwina, no! She fell on him, pressing him to the wall, but now in human form. The wolf girls immediately fled and hunkered down by the stove. The woman remained, crouching before him, staring with embarrassed eyes. He didn't know if she was ashamed because of attacking him, or because the attack had failed.
Edwina, what is the meaning of this?
Bellowed a bearded man of impressive height, arms akimbo.
What are you doing?
It's a witcher, the woman snorted, still on her knees. A brigand with a sword. He came for you, the murderer. He reeks of blood.
Silence, woman. I know him.
Forgive her, Master Geralt. Everything in order?
Forgive her. She didn't know. She thought that since you're a witcher...
He broke off and looked nervously. The woman and the little girls were gathered by the stove. Geralt could have sworn he heard a soft growling.
It's all right, he said. I bear no ill will. But you showed up just in time, not a moment too soon.
I know, said the bearded man, shuddering perceptibly.
Sit you down, sir. Sit down at table. Edwina, bring beer. No. Outside, Dusat. For a word.
In the middle of the farmyard sat a grey cat that fled in a trice at the sight of the Witcher and hid in the nettles.
I don't wish to upset your wife or frighten your children, Geralt announced. And what's more, I have a matter I'd prefer to talk about in private. It concerns a certain favour.
Whatever you want, sir, said the bearded man.
Just say it. I'll fulfil your every wish if it's in my power. I'm indebted to you, greatly indebted. Thanks to you, I walk alive through this world, because you spared me then. I owe you, not me, yourself, because even in lupine form, you remained a man and never harmed anybody. I never harmed anybody, 'tis true. And how did I benefit? My neighbours, having become suspicious, brought a witcher down on me at once. Though paupers, they scrimped and saved in order to hire you. I thought about giving them back their money, admitted Geralt, but it might have aroused suspicion. I gave them my witcher word that I'd removed the werewolf spell from you and had completely healed you of lycanthropy, that you are now as normal as the next man. Such a feat has to cost. If people pay for something, they believe in it. Whatever is paid for becomes real and legal. The more expensive, the better. Recalling that day sends shivers down my spine, said Dusat, paling under his tan. I almost died of fear when I saw you with that silver blade. I thought my last hour had come. There's no end of stories about witcher murderers relishing blood and torture. You, it turned out, are a decent fellow, and a good one. Let's not exaggerate. But you followed my advice and moved out of Guames. I had to, Dusat said gloomily. The people of Guames believed in theory that I was free of the spell. But you were right. A former werewolf doesn't have it easy either. It was as you said, what you used to be means more to people than what you are. I was compelled to move out and roam through strange surroundings where no one knew me. I wandered and wandered until I finally ended up here and met Edwina. It really happens for two therianthropes to form a couple, said Geralt, shaking his head. It's even more seldom for children to be born to such couples. You're a lucky man, Dusart. If only you knew, grinned the werewolf. My children are as pretty as a picture. They're grown up into beautiful maidens, and Edwina and I were made for each other. I wish to be with her to the end of my days. She knew me as a witcher at once, and was prepared to defend herself. She meant to throw boiling borscht over me, would you believe? She must also have heard her fill of werewolf tales about bloodthirsty witches relishing torture. Forgive her, Master Geralt, and we shall soon savour that borscht. Edwina makes delicious borscht. It might be better if I don't impose, said the witcher, shaking his head. I don't want to scare the children, much less worry your wife. To her, I'm still a brigand with a sword. It'd be hard to expect her to take to me at once. She said I reek of blood. Metaphorically, I understand. Not really. No offence, Master Witcher, but you stink to high heaven of it. I haven't had any contact with blood for about 2 weeks, I'd say. The werewolf finished his sentence. It's clotted blood. Dead blood. You touched someone who was bleeding. There's also earlier blood, over a month old. Cold blood. Reptile blood. You've also bled. Living blood from a wound. I'm full of admiration. Us werewolves, said Dusart, standing up proudly, have a slightly more sensitive sense of smell than you humans. I know, smiled Geralt. I know that the werewolf sense of smell is a veritable wonder of nature, which is why I've come to ask you for a favour. Shrews, said Dusart, sniffing. Shrews, and voles, lots of voles. Dung, lots of dung, mainly marten, and weasel. Nothing else. The Witcher sighed and then spat. He didn't conceal his disappointment. It was the fourth cave where Dusart hadn't smelled anything apart from rodents and the predators that hunted them, and an abundance of both the former and latter's dung. They moved on to the next opening gaping in the rock wall. Pebbles shifted under their feet and rolled down the scree. It was steep. They proceeded with difficulty, and Geralt was beginning to feel weary. Dusart either turned into a wolf or remained in human form, depending on the terrain. A she-bear, he said, looking into the next cave and sniffing. With young. She was there, but she's not anymore. There are marmots, shrews, bats, lots of bats, stoat, marten, wolverine, lots of dung. The next cavern. A female polecat. She's on heat. There's also a wolverine. No, 2. A pair of wolverines. An underground spring. The water's slightly sulphurous. Gremlins. A whole flock. Probably 10 of them. Some sort of amphibians. Probably salamanders. Bats. An immense eagle flew down from a rocky ledge located somewhere overhead and circled above, crying out repeatedly. The werewolf raised his head and glanced at the mountain peaks, and the dark clouds gliding out from behind them. There's a storm coming. What a summer, when there's almost not a day without a storm. What shall we do, Master Geralt? Another hole? Another hole. In order to reach the next one, they had to pass under a waterfall cascading down from a cliff. Not very large, but sufficient to wet them through. The moss-covered rocks were as slippery as soap. Dusart metamorphosed into a wolf to continue. Geralt, after slipping dangerously several times, forced himself onward, cursed, and overcame a difficult section on all fours. Lucky Dandelion's not here, he thought. He'd have turned it into a ballad. The lycanthrope in front in wolfish form, with the Witcher behind him on all fours. People would have had a ball. A large hole, Master Witcher, said Dusart, sniffing. Broad and deep. There are mountain trolls there. 5 or 6 hefty trolls. And bats. Loads of bat dung. We'll go on. To the next one. Trolls. Same trolls as before. The caves are connected. A bear? A cub? It was there, but it's gone. Not long since. Marmots? Bats? Vampirodes?
The werewolf leapt back from the next cave as though he'd been stung.
A gorgon, he whispered. There's a huge gorgon deep in the cave. It's sleeping. There's nothing else apart from it.
I'm not surprised, the Witcher muttered. Let's go away, silently, because it's liable to awaken. They walked away, looking back anxiously. They approached the next cave, fortunately located away from the gorgon's lair, slowly, aware that it wouldn't do any harm to be cautious. It didn't do any harm, but turned out to be unnecessary. The next few caves didn't hide anything in their depths other than bats, marmots, mice, voles, and shrews, and thick layers of dung. Geralt was weary and resigned. Dusart clearly was too. But he kept his chin up, you had to grant him that, and didn't betray any discouragement by word or gesture. But the Witcher didn't have any illusions. The werewolf had his doubts about the operation's chances of success. In keeping with what Geralt had once heard and what the old herbalist had confirmed, the steep eastern cliff of Mount Cremora was riddled with holes, penetrated by countless caves. And indeed, they found countless caves. But Dusart clearly didn't believe it was possible to sniff out and find the right one, which was an underground passage leading inside the rocky complex of the citadel. To make matters worse, there was a flash of lightning and a clap of thunder. It began to rain. Geralt had a good mind to spit, swear coarsely, and declare the enterprise over, but he overcame the feeling.
Let's go on, Dusart. Next hole.
As you wish, Master Geralt. And suddenly, quite like in a cheap novel, a turning point in the action occurred by the next opening gaping in the rock. Bats, announced the werewolf, sniffing. Bats and a cat.
A lynx. A wildcat.
A cat, said Dusart, standing up. An ordinary domestic cat. Otto Dusart looked at the small bottles of elixirs with curiosity and watched the Witcher drinking them. He observed the changes taking place in Geralt's appearance, and his eyes widened in wonder and fear.
Don't make me enter that cave with you, he said. No offence, but I'm not going. The fear of what might be there makes my hair stand on end.
It never occurred to me to ask you to. Go home, Dusart, to your wife and children. You have done me a favour. You've done what I asked of you, so I can't demand any more.
I'll wait, protested the werewolf. I'll wait until you emerge.
I don't know when I'll be coming out, said Geralt, adjusting the sword on his back. Or if I'll come out at all.
Don't say that. I'll wait. I'll wait until dusk.
The cave bottom was carpeted in a dense coat of bat guano. The bats themselves, pot-bellied flittermice, were hanging in whole clusters on the cave ceiling, wriggling and squeaking drowsily. At first, the ceiling was high above Geralt's head, and he could walk along the level bottom tolerably quickly and comfortably. The comfort soon ended, however. First he had to stoop, then stoop lower, and finally nothing remained but to move along on his hands and knees, and ultimately crawl. There was a moment when he stopped, determined to turn back, when the cramped conditions represented a grave risk of getting stuck. But he could hear the whoosh of water, and feel on his face a current of cold air. Aware of the risk, he forced his way through a crack and sighed in relief as it began to open out. All of a sudden, the corridor turned into a chute down which he slid straight into the channel of an underground stream, gushing out from under a rock and disappearing under another. Somewhere above was a weak light, emanating from the same place as cold gusts of air. The pool the stream vanished into appeared to be totally underwater, and the Witcher wasn't keen on the idea of swimming through, although he suspected it was a sump. He chose a route upstream against the fast-flowing current, along a ramp leading upwards. Before emerging from the ramp into a great chamber, he was completely drenched and covered in silt from the lime deposits. The chamber was huge, covered all over with majestic dripstones, draperies, stalagmites, stalactites, and stalagnates. The stream flowed along the bottom in a deeply hollowed-out meander. There was also a gentle glow of light and a weak draught. There was a faint odour. The Witcher's sense of smell couldn't compete with the werewolf's, but he also smelled what the werewolf had earlier, the faint odour of cat urine. He stopped for a moment and looked around. The draught pointed to the exit, an opening like a palace portal, flanked by pillars of mighty stalagmites. Right alongside, he saw a hollow full of fine sand. That hollow was what smelt of cat. He saw numerous feline paw prints in the sand. He slung his sword, which he'd had to remove in the cramped space of the fissure, across his back, and passed between the stalagmites. The corridor, leading gently upwards, had a high ceiling and was dry. There were large rocks on the bottom, but it was possible to walk. He set off, until his way was blocked by a door, robust and typical of a castle. Until that moment, he hadn't been at all certain if he was following the right track, had no certainty that he had entered the right cave. The door seemed to confirm his choice. There was a small opening in the door, just above the threshold, which had quite recently been carved out. A passage for the cat. He pushed the door. It didn't budge, but the witch's amulet quivered slightly. The door was magical, protected by a spell. The weak vibration of the medallion suggested, however, that it wasn't a powerful spell. He brought his face close to the door. Friend. The door opened noiselessly on oiled hinges. As he had accurately guessed, it had been equipped with a standard weak magical protection and a basic password, as no one, fortunately for him, had felt like installing anything more sophisticated. It was intended to separate the castle from the cave complex and deter any creatures incapable of using even simple magic. The natural cave ceased beyond the door, which he wedged open with a stone. A corridor carved out of the rock with pickaxes extended before him. In spite of all the evidence, he still wasn't certain, until the moment he saw light in front of him, the flickering light of a brand or a cresset, and a moment later heard some very familiar laughter, cackling. The light and cackling, it turned out, were coming from a large room illuminated by a torch stuck into an iron basket. Trunks, boxes and barrels were piled up against the walls. Boo and Bang were sitting at one of the crates using barrels as seats. They were playing dice. Bang was cackling, clearly having thrown a higher number. There was a demijohn of moonshine on the crate, and beside it some kind of snack. A roast human leg. The Witcher drew his sword. Hello, boys. Boo and Bang stared at him open-mouthed for some time. Then they roared and leapt to their feet, knocking over the barrels and snatching up their weapons. Boo a scythe, and Bang a broad scimitar, and charged the Witcher. They took him by surprise, although he hadn't expected it to be an easy fight, but he hadn't expected the misshapen giants to move so fast. Boo swung his scythe low, and had it not been for a jump, Geralt would have lost both legs. He barely dodged Bang's blow, the scimitar striking sparks from the rock wall. The Witcher was able to cope with fast opponents, and large ones too. Fast or slow, large or small, they all had places sensitive to pain. And they had no idea how fast a Witcher could be after drinking his elixirs. Boo howled, lacerated on the elbow, and Bang, cut on the knee, howled even louder. The Witcher deceived Boo with a swift spin, jumped over the scythe blade, and cut him in the ear with the very tip of his blade. Boo roared, shaking his head, swung the scythe, and attacked. Geralt arranged his fingers and struck him with the Ard sign. Assaulted by the spell, Boo flopped onto his backside on the floor, and his teeth rang audibly. Bang took a great swing with a scimitar. Geralt nimbly ducked under the blade, slashing the giant's other knee in passing, spun around and leapt at Boo, who was struggling to stand up, cutting him across the eyes. Boo managed to pull his head back, however, and was caught on the brow ridge. Blood instantly blinded the ogre troll. Boo yelled and leapt up, attacking Geralt blindly. Geralt dodged away. Boo lurched towards Bang and collided with him. Bang shoved him away and charged the Witcher, roaring furiously, to aim a fierce backhand blow at him. Geralt avoided the blade with a fast feint and a half-turn and cut the ogre troll twice on both elbows. Bang howled, but didn't release the scimitar and took another swing, slashing broadly and chaotically. Geralt dodged, spinning beyond the blade's range. His maneuver carried him behind Bang's back, and he had to take advantage of a chance like that. He turned his sword around and cut from below, vertically, right between Bang's buttocks. The ogre troll seized himself by the backside, howled, squealed, hobbled, bent his knees, and pissed himself. Boo, blinded, swung his scythe, and struck, but not the Witcher, who had spun away in a pirouette. He struck his comrade, who was still holding himself by the buttocks, and hacked his head from his shoulders. Air escaped from the severed windpipe with a loud hiss. Blood burst from the artery like lava erupting from a volcano, high, right up to the ceiling. Bang stood, gushing blood, like a headless statue in a fountain held up by his huge flat feet. But he finally tipped over and fell like a log. Boo wiped the blood from his eyes. He roared like a buffalo when it finally dawned on him what had happened. He stamped his feet and swung his scythe. He whirled around on the spot, looking for the Witcher. He didn't find him, because the Witcher was behind him. On being cut in the armpit, he dropped the scythe, attacking Geralt with his bare hands. But the blood had blinded him again, and he careered into the wall. Geralt was upon him and slashed. Boo obviously didn't know an artery had been severed, and that he ought to have died long ago. He roared and spun around on the spot, waving his arms about, until his knees crumpled beneath him, and he dropped down in a pool of blood. Now kneeling, he roared and carried on swinging, but quieter and more drowsily. In order to end it, Geralt went in close and thrust his sword under Boo's sternum. That was a mistake. The ogre troll groaned and grabbed the blade, crossguard, and the Witcher's hand. His eyes were already misting over, but he didn't relax his grip. Geralt put a boot against his chest, braced himself, and tugged. Boo didn't let go, even though blood was spurting from his hand.
"You stupid whoreson,"
drawled Pasta, entering the cavern and aiming at the Witcher with his double-limbed lathe arbalest.
"You've come here to die. You're done for, devil spawn. Hold him, Boo."
Geralt tugged. Boo groaned but didn't let go. The hunchback grinned and released the trigger. Geralt crouched to evade the heavy bolt and felt the fletching brush against his side before it slammed into the wall. Boo released the sword and, lying on his stomach, caught the Witcher by the legs and held him fast. Pasta croaked in triumph and raised the crossbow, but didn't manage to fire. An enormous wolf hurtled into the cavern like a grey missile. It struck Pasta in the legs from behind in the wolfish style, tearing his cruciate ligaments and popliteal artery. The hunchback yelled and fell over. The bowstring of the released arbalest clanged and Boo rasped. The bolt had struck him right in the ear and entered up to the fletching, and the bolt protruded from his other ear. Pasta howled. The wolf opened its terrible jaws and seized him by the head. The howling turned into wheezing. Geralt pushed away the finely dead ogre troll from his legs. Dusart, now in human form, stood up over Pasta's corpse and wiped his lips and chin.
"After 42 years I've been a werewolf,"
he said, meeting the Witcher's gaze.
"It was about time I finally bit someone to death."
"I had to come," Dusart said, explaining his actions. "I knew, Master Geralt, that I had to warn you."
"About them?"
Geralt wiped his blade and pointed to the lifeless bodies.
"Not only."
The Witcher entered the room the werewolf was pointing at, and stepped back involuntarily. The stone floor was black with congealed blood. A black-rimmed hole gaped in the centre of the room. A pile of bodies was heaped up beside it. Naked and mutilated, cut up, quartered, occasionally with the skin flayed off them. It was difficult to estimate how many there were. The sound of bones being crunched and cracked rose up very audibly from deep in the hole.
"I wasn't able to smell it before,"
mumbled Dusart, in a voice full of disgust.
"I only smelled it when you opened the door down there at the bottom. Let's flee from here, master, far from this charnel house. I still have something to sort out here, but you go. I thank you very much for coming to help. Don't thank me. I owed you a debt. I'm glad I was able to pay it back.
A spiral staircase led upwards, winding up a cylindrical shaft carved into the rock. It was difficult to estimate precisely, but Geralt roughly calculated that had it been a staircase in a typical tower, he would have climbed to the first, or possibly the second story. He had counted 62 steps when a door finally barred his way. Like the one down in the cave, that door also had a passage carved in it for a cat. Unlike the heavy doors in the cave, it wasn't magical, and yielded easily after the handle had been pushed down. The room he entered had no windows and was dimly lit. Beneath the ceiling hung several magical globes, but only one was active. The room stank acridly of chemicals and every possible kind of monstrosity. A quick glance revealed what it contained. Specimen jars, demijohns and flagons on shelves, retorts, glass spheres and tubes, steel instruments and tools, unmistakably a laboratory in other words. Large specimen jars were standing in a row on a bookshelf by the entrance. The nearest one was full of human eyeballs, floating in a yellow liquid like Mirabelle plums in compote. In another jar, there was a tiny homunculus, no larger than 2 fists held together. In a third, a human head was floating in the third jar. Geralt might not have recognized the features, which were distorted by cuts, swelling, and discoloration, barely visible through the cloudy liquid and thick glass. But the head was quite bald. Only one sorcerer shaved his head. Harlan Zara, it transpired, had never made it to Povis. Things were suspended in other jars, various blue and pale horrors, but there were no more heads. There was a table in the middle of the room, a steel, purpose-built table with a gutter. A naked corpse was lying on the table, a diminutive one, the remains of a child, a fair-haired little girl. The remains had been slit open with a cut in the shape of a letter Y. The internal organs, removed, had been arranged on both sides of the body, evenly, neatly and orderly. It looked just like an engraving from an anatomical atlas. All that was missing were plate numbers, figure 1, figure 2, and so on. He caught sight of a movement out of the corner of his eye. A large black cat flashed by close to the wall, glanced at him, hissed, and fled through the open door. Geralt set off after him. "Master!" He stopped and turned around. In the corner stood a low cage resembling a chicken coop. He saw thin fingers clenching the iron bars, and then 2 eyes. "Master, help me!" It was a little boy, no more than 10 years old, cowering and trembling. "Help me!"
"Shh! Be quiet. You're in no danger now, but hold on a little longer. I'll be back soon to get you."
"Master, don't go!"
"Be quiet, I said."
First, there was a library with dust that made his nose tingle. Then something like a drawing room, and then a bedchamber, a huge bed with a black canopy on ebony columns. He heard a rustle and turned around. Sorrel Daggerland was standing in the doorway, coiffured in a mantle embroidered with gold stars. A smallish, quite grey creature, armed with a Zeracanian sabre, was standing beside him. "I have a specimen jar full of formalin prepared," said the sorcerer. "For your head, you abomination. Kill him, Beta." The creature, an incredibly fast grey apparition, an agile and noiseless grey rat, had already attacked with a whistle and a flash of the sabre before Daggerland had finished his sentence, and while he was still delighting in his own voice. Geralt avoided 2 blows, delivered diagonally in classic style. The first time he felt the movement of air pushed by a blade by his ear, and the second a brush on his sleeve. He parried the third blow, and for a moment they crossed swords. He saw the face of the grey creature, its large yellow eyes with vertical pupils, narrow slits instead of a nose, and pointed ears. The creature had no mouth at all. They parted. The creature turned around nimbly, attacked at once, with an ethereal dancing step, once again diagonally, once again predictably. It was inhumanly energetic, incredibly agile, hellishly swift, but stupid. It had no idea how fast a witcher could be after drinking his elixirs. Geralt allowed it only one blow, which he outmaneuvered. Then he attacked with a trained sequence of movements he had practiced 100 times. He encircled the great creature with a fast half-turn, executed a deceptive feint, and slashed it across the collarbone. The blood hadn't even had time to spurt when he slashed it under the arm, and jumped aside, ready for more. But no more was needed. It turned out that the creature did have a mouth. It opened in the grey face like a wound, splitting widely from ear to ear, although no more than half an inch. But the creature didn't utter a word or a sound. It fell onto its knees, and then it sighed. For a moment it twitched, moving its limbs like a dog dreaming, and died in silence. It was then that Dandelion committed an error. Rather than fleeing, he raised both hands and began to bark out a spell in a furious voice full of rage and hatred. Flames whirled around his hands, forming a fiery globe. It looked a little like candy floss being made. It even smelled similar. Dandelion didn't manage to create a complete globe. He had no idea how fast a witcher could be after drinking his elixirs. Geralt was upon him and cut across the globe in the sorcerer's hands. There was a roar, like a furnace being ignited, and sparks flew. Dandelion yelled, releasing the flaming globe from his bloodied hands. The globe went out, filling the chamber with a smell of burning caramel. Geralt dropped his sword. He slapped Dandelion hard in the face with his open palm. The sorcerer screamed, cowered, and turned his back on him. The witcher seized him, caught him by a buckle, and clasped his neck in his forearm. Dandelion yelled and began to kick out. "You cannot!" he wailed. "You cannot kill me! It is forbidden! I am a human being!" Geralt tightened his forearm around his neck. Not too tightly at first. "It wasn't me!" wailed the sorcerer. "It was Ortolan. Ortolan forced me. He forced me. And Maruta Ikati knew about everything. She did. Maruta. That medallion was her idea. She made me do it." The witcher tightened his grip. "Help! Somebody help me!" Geralt tightened his grip. "Somebody help! No!" Dandelion wheezed, saliva dripping copiously from his mouth. Geralt turned his head away and tightened his grip. Dandelion lost consciousness and went limp. Tighter. The hyoid bone cracked. Tighter. His larynx gave way. Tighter. Even tighter. The cervical vertebrae cracked and dislocated. Geralt held Dandelion up a moment longer. Then he jerked the sorcerer's head hard sideways to be quite certain. Then he let him go. The sorcerer slid down onto the floor, softly like a silk cloth. The witcher wiped the saliva from his sleeve on a curtain. The large black cat appeared from nowhere. It rubbed itself against Dandelion's body, licked his motionless hand, meowed and cried mournfully. It lay down beside the corpse, cuddling up against its side, and looked at the witcher with its wide-open golden eyes. "I had to," said the witcher. "It was necessary. If anyone, you ought to understand." The cat narrowed its eyes to indicate it did.